Listen here, you old hag. Your son is mine now. Tomorrow you're going to that filthy nursing home to rot in a cheap coffin. Brielle's voice cut through the phone speaker like a blade dipped in acid. I stood in my kitchen in Greenwich, gripping the marble countertop with both hands, staring at the device as if it had transformed into something venomous. Each word landed with deliberate cruelty, designed to wound, to break, to force submission. I could hear Sebastian in the background, his voice muffled, probably asking who she was talking to. My son, my only child. The boy I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through midnight fevers, sent to college with pride swelling in my chest, despite knowing I'd failed him in so many ways. Are you listening to me, Ophelia? Her voice dripped with satisfaction now, enjoying my silence. I said your son is mine. You had your chance for 32 years, and you blew it. Always working, always traveling, always putting your precious company before your own child. Well, guess what? Sebastian finally found someone who puts him first, someone young and beautiful, who actually cares about his feelings, not some dried-up old woman who suddenly wants to play mommy now that daddy's dead. My breath caught, mentioning Caspian like that, so casually cruel, like his death 3 years ago was just ammunition for her verbal assault. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her exactly what kind of venomous parasite she was, to warn her that she'd picked the wrong woman to threaten. But something stopped me. Years of negotiating multi-million-dollar deals had taught me that the person who loses control first loses the war. And Brielle wanted me to explode. She was recording this, I was certain. She wanted hysterical screaming she could play back for Sebastian, proof that his mother was the unhinged villain she'd spent 8 months painting me as. So I breathed, deep, controlled breaths that my yoga instructor had taught me for stress management. In through the nose, out through the mouth. My heart was hammering against my ribs like it wanted to escape my chest, but my face remained calm. The phone sat on the counter between us like a coiled snake. Nothing to say? Brielle laughed, high-pitched and theatrical. That's what I thought. You know I'm right. Sebastian told me everything, Ophelia. Everything. How you missed his elementary school plays because of client meetings. How his dad was the one who taught him to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to shave. How you sold your company for $12 million but couldn't spare 12 minutes to ask him about his day. He resents you. God, does he resent you. And I've helped him see that it's okay to put himself first for once. To cut toxic people out of his life, even if that toxic person happens to be his birth mother. Birth mother. She'd reduced me to biology, as if 32 years of loving someone, even badly, even from a distance, counted for nothing. I thought about all the moments I did remember. Reading him bedtime stories when he was 4, his small body curled against mine, smelling like baby shampoo and innocence. Watching him graduate high school, then college, bursting with pride, even though he barely looked at me in the crowd because his father was the one he wanted approval from. The way his face crumpled at Caspian's funeral, and how I'd reached for him only to have him pull away, choosing to grieve alone rather than in my arms. She was right about so much. That was the poison in her words. They weren't complete lies. I had prioritized my company over my family. I had missed plays and games and parent-teacher conferences. I had believed that providing financial security and building a legacy was the same as being present. And by the time I realized my mistake, by the time I sold the company and tried to reconnect, Caspian was dead and Sebastian was already halfway across the country in San Francisco, building a life that didn't include me in any meaningful way. Still nothing? Brielle's voice turned sharp with impatience. You know what? Fine. Stay silent. But understand this, Ophelia. Tomorrow morning, Sebastian and I are driving up to Greenwich. We're going to pack your things. We've already called Silver Oaks. That's the assisted living facility on Route 1, in case you're too senile to remember. They have a room available. Small, but adequate for someone your age. Sebastian's already signed the paperwork. You're 57 years old, and you're going to rot in that place, eating mushy food and playing bingo with actual old people until you die. And when you do die, we'll bury you in the cheapest coffin Walmart sells, because that's what selfish mothers deserve. Something inside me crystallized in that moment. Not rage, though that was there, burning cold and patient in my stomach, but clarity. This woman had revealed herself completely. She wasn't just hostile or jealous or insecure. She was calculating, methodical. She'd studied me like I was a business competitor, identified my vulnerabilities, and now she was executing her plan to remove me from Sebastian's life entirely while gaining access to the fortune I'd spent 3 decades building. The nursing home comment was particularly revealing. She knew I was only 57. She knew I was in perfect health, still running 5 miles 3 times a week, still managing my investment portfolio with the same sharp mind that had built my consultancy from nothing into an 8-figure exit. This wasn't about concern for my well-being. This was about control, about isolating Sebastian completely while she positioned herself to inherit everything I'd worked for. "Goodbye, Brielle," I said quietly. My voice was steady, almost gentle. "I'll see you tomorrow." I ended the call before she could respond, set the phone down carefully on the counter as if it might shatter. My hands were trembling now, the adrenaline finally catching up with my body even as my mind remained ice-cold and focused. I looked around my kitchen, the one Caspian and I had renovated 5 years before his death. Marble countertops he'd chosen, custom cabinets I'd selected. The espresso machine we'd bought together in Italy on our last anniversary trip, back when I still stupidly believed we had decades left together. This house, this beautiful $3.2 million house in Greenwich, Connecticut, with its 5 bedrooms and professionally landscaped grounds and the view of Long Island Sound from the master bedroom. The house where I'd raised Sebastian, where Caspian had died in our bed at 2 in the morning with me screaming for an ambulance that arrived too late. She wanted this house. She wanted my money. She wanted to erase me completely so she could play the grieving daughter-in-law who inherited everything. I walked through the dining room, my footsteps silent on the Persian rug, and entered Caspian's study. I'd kept it exactly as he'd left it. His architectural drawings still pinned to the corkboard, his reading glasses on the desk, his favorite cardigan draped over the chair back, still smelling faintly of his cologne even after 3 years. Sebastian thought this was morbid, my inability to pack away his father's things. But it wasn't about denial. It was about keeping the best part of my marriage alive in the only way I could. I opened the bottom drawer of Caspian's antique mahogany dresser, the one he'd inherited from his grandfather. Inside was a thick manila envelope. I'd been preparing this for 6 weeks now, ever since Philippa Rutherford, my best friend since business school, the sharpest family law attorney in Connecticut, had presented me with her findings about my daughter-in-law. Philippa had been suspicious of Brielle from the beginning. "Too many red flags," she'd said. Too convenient how Brielle had accidentally bumped into Sebastian at that networking event in San Francisco just 6 months after Caspian's funeral, when Sebastian was drowning in grief and guilt and desperate for someone to tell him his feelings mattered. Too calculated how quickly she'd moved him toward marriage, pressuring him with tears and ultimatums until he proposed after only 4 months. So Philippa did what good lawyers do. She investigated. What she found made my blood run cold. Brielle Cortez wasn't some innocent influencer who'd fallen genuinely in love with my son. She was 29 years old with a pattern. At 23, she'd married a 58-year-old widowed businessman named Richard Pemberton in Portland, Oregon. The marriage lasted 11 months. It ended in a vicious divorce where Richard accused her of financial manipulation, emotional abuse, and marrying him specifically to access his money after his wife's death. The court records were sealed, but Philippa had connections. Brielle walked away with a $60,000 settlement and immediately disappeared from Portland. For 5 years, she'd kept a lower profile, built her Instagram presence, cultivated the image of a successful lifestyle influencer, even though her actual income was sporadic at best. Then she'd set her sights on Sebastian, my vulnerable, grief-stricken son who'd grown up feeling emotionally neglected by his mother and was desperately seeking validation from someone who seemed to put him first. The envelope contained everything. The investigator's report with dated photographs of Brielle consulting 5 different attorneys about elder incapacity laws and inheritance rights. Transcripts of 17 phone calls she'd made to me over the past 8 months, calls I'd recorded legally under Connecticut's one-party consent law. In those recordings, her voice dripped with barely concealed contempt as she made comments about my age, my health, my confusion, laying groundwork for some future claim that I was mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. There were bank records, too, showing the $47,000 in credit card debt she'd accumulated in joint accounts with Sebastian, debt he had no idea existed because she intercepted all the statements. There were screenshots from online forums where she'd posted under a pseudonym, asking questions like, "How do you get inheritance early from difficult in-laws?" And, "Can a son get power of attorney if his mother is being unreasonable?" And there was the background check on her first marriage, photos of Richard Pemberton's court filings, his lawyer's statements describing a pattern of isolation, manipulation, and financial abuse that was chillingly identical to what I was watching her do to Sebastian now. I picked up the envelope. It was heavy with evidence, with truth, with the ammunition I needed to destroy her completely. But I didn't want Sebastian to hear it from me. I needed him to discover it himself, because if I confronted him directly, Brielle would twist it. She'd cry and claim I was lying, that I'd fabricated everything because I was a jealous, controlling mother who couldn't accept that her son loved someone else. She'd done it before, every time I tried to warn him about her suspicious behavior. No, this had to be different. This had to be undeniable. I walked upstairs to the guest bedroom, the one Brielle always slept in when they visited. Sebastian insisted on sleeping separately when they stayed here, claiming the queen bed in his childhood room was more comfortable than the guest room's king. But I knew the real reason. Some part of him still felt like a child in his old room, regressing to the boy who'd needed distance from his demanding mother. And Brielle encouraged it, loved having a room to herself where she could snoop undisturbed. Because she did snoop. I'd noticed it after their last visit 3 months ago. Small things moved. Papers on my desk rifled through. The locked drawer in my office desk showed scratches around the keyhole where she'd tried unsuccessfully to pick it. She was hunting for information she could use. Financial statements, medical records, anything that would help her build a case for my incompetence or give her leverage over Sebastian's inheritance. So I was giving her exactly what she was looking for. I opened the dresser in the guest room and placed the envelope in the third drawer beneath some spare linens. Not hidden exactly, just innocuous enough that she'd think she'd discovered it by accident when she inevitably went through my things tomorrow. And I knew she would. Her threat about packing my belongings for the nursing home wasn't just cruelty. It was an excuse to search every inch of this house while Sebastian was distracted with the emotional manipulation she'd use to keep him compliant. I imagined her opening that drawer, seeing the envelope, her fingers trembling as she pulled out page after page of evidence documenting exactly who she was and what she'd done. I imagined the moment she realized I'd known all along, that I'd been 3 steps ahead of her, documenting everything, building an airtight case while she thought I was just a pathetic old woman too weak to fight back. And I imagined her scream when she understood that she'd lost. Tomorrow morning, when she opened that drawer expecting to find ammunition against me, she'd instead find the complete destruction of everything she'd been working toward for the past 8 months. And that scream, that visceral shriek of someone watching their carefully constructed lies collapse, would be loud enough for the neighbors to hear, loud enough, perhaps, for them to call the police. I closed the drawer gently, walked back downstairs, made myself a cup of chamomile tea with hands that had finally stopped shaking, sat at the kitchen table where Caspian and I had shared 34 years of breakfasts, arguments, reconciliations, and quiet, companionable silences. "I'm protecting our son," I whispered to the empty air, to my dead husband's memory, to whatever part of him might still exist somewhere beyond death. I know I failed him before, but not this time, not anymore. The house settled into nighttime quiet around me. I sipped my tea slowly, tasting lavender and honey. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows, but inside, everything was still, waiting. The calm before the storm I'd so carefully orchestrated. Tomorrow, Brielle Cortez would learn what every predator eventually discovers. Sometimes the prey is more dangerous than the hunter. Sometimes the weak-looking target has teeth you never saw coming. And sometimes the old woman you dismissed as pathetic and powerless is actually the smartest person in the room, playing a longer game than you ever imagined possible. I finished my tea, rinsed the cup, turned off the kitchen lights. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, my daughter-in-law would scream loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, And I would finally get my son back. I suppose I should explain how we arrived at this moment. How a woman like me, Ophelia Letmore, former CEO, self-made millionaire, someone who once commanded boardrooms full of men twice my size, ended up being threatened with a nursing home by a 29-year-old Instagram influencer who married my son 8 months ago. It started 3 years ago on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember the day precisely because precision was always my strength. Caspian died at 2:17 in the morning. The paramedics arrived at 2:31. They pronounced him dead at 2:48. My husband of 34 years, gone in 31 minutes. Massive heart attack. No warning. He went to sleep beside me and simply never woke up. Sebastian was in Tokyo on a business trip, some tech conference his startup was sponsoring. He got my call at what would have been early evening his time. I heard his voice crack when I told him. Heard the specific sound a grown man makes when he's trying not to cry in public. He caught the next flight out, but it took 18 hours. 18 hours of traveling while his father lay in a morgue, growing cold and still and irretrievably gone. He arrived hollow-eyed and silent. At the funeral, he stood 3 feet away from me instead of beside me. We didn't hug. We didn't cry together. We existed in separate bubbles of grief, unable to bridge the distance that decades of my absence had created, because Caspian had been everything to Sebastian that I hadn't been. Present father, attentive parent, the one who showed up. I'd built my consultancy from nothing, starting when Sebastian was 2 years old. Caspian supported it. He was proud of me even. But someone had to sacrifice their career to be the primary parent, and it was never going to be him. His architecture firm was already established, successful, demanding. So we made a choice. I'd build my dream while he raised our son, and somehow we'd all be happy. Except Sebastian wasn't happy. He was polite, respectful, distant. By the time he was a teenager, we'd become strangers who happened to share DNA. I tried. God, I tried. But I didn't speak his emotional language, and he'd learned early not to need me for anything meaningful. Caspian was his North Star. I was just the woman who paid for things and occasionally showed up for major life events if my calendar permitted. When I sold my company 3 years before Caspian died, I thought I finally had time to fix things. I was 54. Sebastian was 29. Caspian was 59 and slowing down, talking about retirement, about traveling together, about finally being the couple we'd never quite managed to be while building our separate empires. We had 6 months. 6 beautiful months where Caspian and I rediscovered each other, where I learned to breathe without my phone constantly buzzing, where we renovated the kitchen and planned a trip to Portugal and made love like we were young again instead of exhausted middle-aged people who'd forgotten how to prioritize each other. And then he died, and I discovered that all my money, all my success, all my carefully constructed empire meant absolutely nothing when the person you loved most was gone forever. Sebastian came back for the funeral, stayed 4 days, then flew back to San Francisco. We spoke maybe twice a month after that. Stilted conversations where I asked about his work and he gave one-word answers, where the silences stretched so long I could hear his impatience through the phone. He blamed me, not explicitly, but I could feel it radiating through every interaction. If I'd been around more, maybe Dad wouldn't have been so stressed. If I'd been a real mother, maybe he'd have someone to grieve with instead of grieving alone. 6 months after Caspian's funeral, Sebastian called me with excitement in his voice for the first time since his father died. He'd met someone. Her name was Brielle Cortez. She was beautiful, successful, understanding. She got him in ways no one else did. She made him feel seen. I was happy for him. Truly, he deserved love, comfort, someone to fill the hole Caspian's death had left. When he sent photos, I saw a pretty young woman with perfect makeup and carefully styled hair, always photographed in flattering light. Her Instagram had 43,000 followers. Her bio said, lifestyle curator and wellness advocate. I didn't think much of it. Young people had careers I didn't understand. That was normal. They got engaged 4 months later. Sebastian called to tell me, and I heard something strange in his voice. Not joy, exactly. More like relief. Like he'd accomplished something difficult and could finally relax. I congratulated him, asked when I could meet her properly. He said soon, maybe Christmas. But Christmas came and they stayed in San Francisco. Brielle had commitments, he said. Sponsorship obligations. Her followers expected holiday content. I sent an expensive gift, a Cartier watch I'd agonized over selecting. She posted a photo of it on Instagram with a generic "so blessed" caption, and no mention of who gave it to her. They got married in March, exactly 2 years after Caspian died. Small ceremony in San Francisco. Just immediate family, Sebastian said. When I arrived, I discovered that meant Brielle's mother, her 2 sisters, and exactly 2 friends of Sebastian's from work. The ceremony lasted 20 minutes. Brielle cried beautifully on cue. Sebastian looked dazed, like he wasn't entirely certain how he'd gotten there. That was when I first felt it. That cold whisper of intuition that had made me successful in business. Something was wrong. Not obviously wrong, but wrong in the way a painting is wrong when it's a skilled forgery. All the details correct, but the soul missing. Brielle was charming to my face, called me Mom within 5 minutes of meeting me, hugged me too tightly, held on too long, asked invasive questions about the house in Greenwich, about my health, about how I was coping with being alone now that dear Caspian was gone. Her sympathy felt rehearsed. Her interest felt predatory. I mentioned my concerns to Sebastian that weekend. Carefully, gently. I said Brielle seemed lovely, but perhaps things were moving fast. Maybe they should consider a prenuptial agreement, just to protect them both. He exploded, actually yelled at me in a way he never had, even as an angry teenager. Called me controlling, manipulative, said I couldn't stand to see him happy because I'd never been happy myself. Said Brielle had warned him I'd try to sabotage their relationship because I was a narcissist who needed to be the center of attention. I apologized, backed off immediately. What else could I do? I'd already lost my husband. I couldn't lose my son too, even if I'd never really had him to begin with. The next few months were a masterclass in manipulation, though I didn't recognize it at the time. Brielle called me frequently. Long, rambling conversations where she complained about Sebastian, how immature he was, how he didn't understand her needs, how difficult marriage was when you were dealing with someone who'd been emotionally stunted by an absent mother. She said that last part so sweetly, so concerned, like she was confiding in me, woman to woman. And stupidly, I thought maybe she was reaching out. Maybe she wanted my advice on how to navigate Sebastian's emotional walls. But every conversation ended the same way, with questions about my finances, about the house, about my investment portfolio, about whether I had a will, a trust, healthcare directives, all framed as concern, as love, as wanting to make sure her new mother-in-law was properly taken care of in her golden years. I was 57, not 77, but Brielle spoke to me like I was ancient, fragile, possibly senile. Philippa noticed it before I did. We had lunch in Greenwich one afternoon, and I mentioned something Brielle had said, some comment about how I seemed confused during our last phone call, how she worried I was having senior moments. Philippa went very still, put down her fork, looked at me with those sharp lawyer eyes that had terrified opposing counsel for 30 years. "Ophelia," she said quietly, "that woman is building a case against you." I laughed, actually laughed. Said Philippa was being paranoid, that Brielle was just concerned, maybe a bit socially awkward, but not malicious. Philippa didn't laugh. She asked if she could hire an investigator, just to check, just to be safe. She'd pay for it herself if I was worried about the cost. I said yes, mostly to humor her, partly because that cold whisper of intuition was getting louder. The report came back 3 weeks later. Philippa brought it to my house, sat me down at the kitchen table, and went through it page by page. Her face was grave. The report was 57 pages long. That's when I learned about Richard Pemberton, about Brielle's first marriage, the accusations, the pattern. That's when I saw the forum posts, the attorney consultations, the credit card debt. That's when Philippa showed me the recording she'd suggested I make 6 weeks earlier, recordings of Brielle's phone calls that I'd dismissed as harmless venting, but that Philippa recognized as something far more sinister. "She's isolating him," Philippa explained, her voice clinical and careful. "Classic predatory behavior. She's rewriting his history, making you the villain, positioning herself as his savior. And she's moving fast because she knows time is her enemy. The longer they're married, the more chance Sebastian has to see through her, so she needs to secure her position now. which means removing you from the equation. I felt sick, actually nauseous, because I could see it now, the pattern I'd been too guilty and too desperate to notice. The way Brielle had swooped in exactly when Sebastian was most vulnerable. The speed of the engagement, the isolation from friends, the constant negative reinforcement about me. The way she monitored his phone calls, his emails, his every interaction with anyone who might contradict the narrative she was building. My son wasn't in love. He was being systematically manipulated by someone who'd done this before and gotten away with it. What do I do? I asked Philippa. My voice was shaking. If I confront him, she'll twist it. She'll make me the villain. Philippa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You document everything. You build an airtight case. And you wait for her to make a mistake. Because she will. People like Brielle always get overconfident. They always push too far. So that's what I did. For 6 weeks I documented, recorded phone calls, saved text messages, hired the investigator to follow up on financial irregularities, built my case brick by brick, the same way I'd built my company, with patience, precision, and absolute commitment to the end goal. And tonight, Brielle had finally pushed too far. Tonight, she'd revealed herself completely. Tonight, she'd declared war. Tomorrow, I'd show her what happened when you went to war with someone who'd spent 3 decades outmaneuvering people far more sophisticated than a failed Instagram influencer with delusions of adequacy. Tomorrow, everything changed. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind kept replaying Brielle's words, that venomous promise that tomorrow she'd pack me off to some nursing home like I was a piece of inconvenient furniture. But more than anger, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the sharp, focused clarity that used to come right before closing a major deal. The same feeling I'd had when negotiating my company's sale, when I knew my opponent had underestimated me and was about to pay dearly for that mistake. At 6 in the morning, I was already dressed. Black slacks, a cream cashmere sweater, my pearls, the ones Caspian gave me for our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a woman of means, of dignity, of absolute control. Not someone who could be intimidated into a nursing home by a girl young enough to be my daughter. Philippa arrived at 7:30, right on schedule. I'd called her last night after Brielle hung up, and she dropped everything to be here. That's what 25 years of friendship buys you. Someone who shows up at dawn when your world is imploding, carrying 2 lattes and a leather portfolio that probably contained enough legal ammunition to destroy a small country. "How are you holding up?" she asked, setting the coffee down on my kitchen counter. Her gray hair was pulled back in its usual elegant chignon, her suit impeccable despite the early hour. Philippa had always been beautiful in that fierce, sharp way that made people sit up straighter in her presence. "I'm ready," I said simply. "She's coming at 10. She told Sebastian they needed to get here early to handle things before I became difficult." Philippa's mouth tightened. "You recorded that call last night?" "Every word." I pulled out my phone, played back 30 seconds. Brielle's voice filled my kitchen like poison gas. That filthy nursing home to rot in a cheap coffin. "Jesus Christ," Philippa muttered. "She's not even subtle anymore. She's so confident you're beaten that she's stopped pretending." "That's what I'm counting on," I said. "The envelope is upstairs in the guest room dresser. 3rd drawer. She'll go looking for it, I'm certain. She always snoops when she visits." "And you're sure you want to do it this way?" Philippa asked, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "We could confront them together. Have a formal intervention. I could present the evidence myself." I shook my head. "If it comes from me or from you, she'll claim we fabricated it. She'll cry, play the victim, tell Sebastian we're ganging up on her because we're jealous, bitter old women who can't stand to see him happy. But if he finds that evidence himself, if he reads it without her hovering over his shoulder, feeding him her narrative, he might actually see the truth," Philippa finished. "It's risky, Ophelia. What if she finds it first and destroys it? Then I have copies, 3 sets. 1 in my safety deposit box, 1 with you, 1 with my attorney. But I don't think she'll destroy it. I think she'll panic. And when Brielle panics, she gets loud." Philippa smiled grimly. "Loud enough for the neighbors to call the police? That's the hope." We spent the next hour preparing. Philippa positioned herself in the living room with sight lines to both the front door and the staircase. She'd stay visible, Let Brielle know she was here. Let that add to the pressure. I made myself busy in the kitchen, arranging pastries I'd bought yesterday on a serving platter, like this was a normal family visit and not the beginning of the end of my daughter-in-law's carefully constructed lies. At 9:58, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart rate kicked up despite my outward calm. Through the window, I watched Sebastian's Tesla park. He got out first, looking exhausted. He'd lost weight since the wedding. His face had that hollowed-out quality of someone who wasn't sleeping well, wasn't eating properly. Stress, I thought, or guilt, or the slow, creeping realization that something in his marriage was deeply wrong. Brielle emerged from the passenger side like she was stepping onto a red carpet. Designer sunglasses, perfectly distressed jeans, a leather jacket that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair cascaded in those Instagram-perfect waves. She looked beautiful, confident, victorious. She looked like someone who'd already won. I opened the door before they could knock. "Sebastian, Brielle, come in." My son barely met my eyes. "Hey, Mom." His voice was flat, defeated. He looked like a man being led to an execution, his own mother's, and hating himself for it, but unable to stop. Brielle, by contrast, was all smiles. "Ophelia, so good to see you. You're looking well. Rested." The subtext was clear. Enjoy your rest now, because tomorrow you'll be in a nursing home. "Philippa's here," I said, gesturing toward the living room. She wanted to say hello. Brielle's smile faltered for just a second. She hadn't expected witnesses. "Oh, how nice." Philippa stood, extending her hand with professional warmth that didn't reach her eyes. "Brielle, Sebastian, coffee?" Ophelia made her famous cinnamon rolls. "We're fine," Brielle said quickly, speaking for both of them. "We're actually here to discuss some important family matters. Maybe it would be better if we had privacy?" "Philippa's family," I said smoothly. "She can stay." Sebastian finally spoke up. "Mom, we need to talk about your living situation, about making some changes." His voice cracked on that last word. He couldn't even say it directly. Couldn't say, "We're putting you in a home," because some part of him, buried under months of Brielle's manipulation, still knew this was wrong. "I'm listening," I said, settling into my armchair with my coffee. Perfectly calm, perfectly composed. I saw frustration flash across Brielle's face. She'd expected tears, arguments, the hysteria she'd been priming Sebastian to anticipate. Brielle took over, perching on the edge of the sofa like a predator ready to pounce. "The thing is, Ophelia, we're concerned about you. This house is so big. You're here all alone. At your age, accidents can happen. What if you fell down those stairs? What if you had a medical emergency and no one was here to help?" "I'm 57, not 87, I said mildly. "I run 5 miles 3 times a week. My last physical was flawless. I appreciate your concern, but I'm quite capable of managing my own home." "But that's just it," Brielle pressed, her voice taking on that syrupy, condescending tone I'd grown to hate. "Sometimes we don't see our own decline. Sebastian's told me how confused you've seemed on phone calls, how you repeat yourself, how you forget things." I looked at my son. "Sebastian, is that true? Do you think I'm confused?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. Sometimes you do seem a little scattered, Mom. And Brielle's right. This house is a lot to maintain. We've been looking at options. Nice places. Comfortable. Where you'd have people around, activities, medical care if you need it." "You mean Silver Oaks," I said quietly. Brielle's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected me to know the specific name. "How did you—" "You mentioned it last night, on the phone, when you called to threaten me." Sebastian's head snapped up. "What? Brielle, you didn't tell me you called Mom last night." "I didn't threaten anyone," Brielle said quickly, her voice rising. "I had a conversation with your mother about options. She's twisting my words, Sebastian. This is exactly what I warned you about. The manipulation. The victim playing. Playing the victim?" My voice stayed calm, but something sharp entered it. "Brielle, would you like to hear the recording of what you said to me? I have it right here on my phone." The color drained from her face. "You recorded me? That's illegal. Sebastian, did you hear that? Your mother is recording private phone calls. That's not normal. That's paranoid. That's exactly the kind of behavior that shows she needs professional help." Connecticut is a one-party consent state, Philippa interjected smoothly. Perfectly legal to record your own phone conversations. And given the nature of the threats made, I'd say it was prudent. Threats? Sebastian looked genuinely confused now. What threats? Brielle, what is she talking about? Brielle stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. This is exactly why we need to take action now, Sebastian. Your mother is delusional. She's making up stories. She's trying to drive a wedge between us. She turned to me, and for just a second, I saw the real Brielle beneath the Instagram-perfect facade. The calculation, the rage, the absolute certainty that she deserved everything I had, and I was just an obstacle to be removed. You know what? Fine. We'll do this the hard way. Sebastian already has power of attorney paperwork ready. We'll have you declared mentally incompetent. We'll get a medical evaluation. And then you won't have a choice about Silver Oaks or anywhere else. I don't have power of attorney paperwork, Sebastian said, his voice strange. Brielle, what are you talking about? She turned to him, her expression shifting instantly to wounded innocence. Baby, I was trying to protect you from having to deal with this. I had my lawyer draw up the documents. You just need to sign them. It's for her own good. You know she needs help. You've said so yourself 100 times. When have I said that? Sebastian's voice was rising now, confusion turning to something else, something that looked like the beginning of clarity. I said she seemed stressed. I never said she was incompetent. I never said anything about power of attorney. This is what she does. Brielle's voice was getting shrill now. She gets in your head. She makes you doubt me. She can't stand that you chose me over her. She's a narcissist, Sebastian. A toxic, manipulative narcissist who will destroy our marriage if you let her. The clinical precision of her accusations was almost impressive. She'd clearly researched the language, knew the buzzwords that would resonate with someone who'd grown up feeling emotionally neglected. But she'd pushed too hard, too fast, and Sebastian was finally starting to see it. I need some air, he said quietly, standing up. I need to think. Sebastian, don't... Brielle started. I said I need to think. The force in his voice startled all of us. My son, who avoided confrontation like other people avoided fire, was finally pushing back. This whole thing, it feels wrong. It feels rushed. Mom doesn't seem incompetent to me. She seems fine. Better than fine. And you're talking about power of attorney and forced commitments, and I never agreed to any of that. He walked out the front door. Just walked out into the November morning, leaving the three of us in a silence so thick it felt like a physical presence. Brielle's hands were shaking. This is your fault, she hissed at me. You've poisoned him against me. You can't stand to see him happy. I think you should go upstairs and freshen up, I said calmly. Guest room. Take all the time you need. Something flickered in her eyes. Suspicion, maybe. Or curiosity. But her need to snoop was stronger than her caution. It always had been. Fine, she snapped. I need to fix my makeup anyway. This is so stressful. You have no idea what you're putting us through. She stomped up the stairs, her designer boots loud on the hardwood. Philippa and I exchanged a look. Now we waited. I went to find Sebastian. He was sitting on the back patio, staring at Long Island Sound, his shoulders hunched. I sat down beside him, giving him space but offering presence. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Did she really threaten you? He asked finally. His voice was small, young. He sounded like the little boy who used to ask me if I loved him more than my work, and I'd always said yes, even though we both knew I was lying. Yes, I said simply. She told me I'd rot in a filthy nursing home until I died in a cheap coffin. She said you were hers now, that I had no place in your life anymore. He flinched. I didn't know. I swear, Mom. I didn't know she was saying those things. I know you didn't, I said gently. But Sebastian, there are other things you don't know, things I need you to see. Not because I want to hurt you, but because I love you and I can't watch this happen anymore. What things? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw fear in his eyes, fear of what he was about to learn, fear that his world was about to shatter. Before I could answer, a scream split the air. It came from upstairs, high-pitched, visceral, the sound of someone whose carefully constructed world had just imploded. Sebastian jumped to his feet. Philippa was already moving toward the stairs, and I just sat there, waiting, my heart pounding, but my face calm. The scream went on and on, rising in pitch and intensity. I heard something crash, probably the lamp on the dresser. Then Brielle's voice shrieking, "You bitch! You fucking bitch! Sebastian! Sebastian!" My son ran inside. I followed more slowly. By the time I reached the guest room, Sebastian was standing in the doorway, frozen, staring at the scene before him. Brielle was on her knees beside the dresser, papers scattered around her like snow. Her makeup was running, her perfect hair disheveled. She was holding the investigator's report in shaking hands, and her face was a mask of pure, undiluted rage. "What is this?" Sebastian's voice was barely a whisper. "It's lies!" Brielle screamed. "All lies. Your mother fabricated this to destroy me because she's jealous and bitter and can't stand that you love me more than you love her." But Sebastian was already bending down, picking up pages. I watched his face as he read, watched the confusion turn to disbelief, turn to something harder, something that looked like grief. He picked up the background check on Richard Pemberton, read the court documents describing Brielle's first marriage, the accusations, the pattern, picked up the credit card statements showing $47,000 in hidden debt, picked up the transcripts of her phone calls to me, complete with timestamps and dates. "You researched my family before we met," he said flatly, reading from the investigator's report. "You knew exactly how much money my mother had. You planned this. Before we even had our first date, you planned this. That's not... I didn't..." Brielle was scrambling now, her usual eloquence deserting her. "Okay, yes, I looked you up. Everyone does that now. It's normal. It's social media. But I didn't marry you for money. I love you, Sebastian. I love you so much." He held up the forum screenshots. "How do you get inheritance early from difficult in-laws? You posted this, Brielle, 2 months after we got married. While you were telling me you loved me, you were on internet forums asking how to get my mother's money." "She made those up." Brielle pointed at me, her voice hysterical. "She photoshopped them. She hired people to fabricate evidence. Can't you see what she's doing? She's trying to break us up." Sebastian turned to me. His eyes were red but dry. "Are these real, Mom? All of it?" "Every page," I said quietly. "I can provide verification for every document. The investigator will testify to his findings. The forum posts are archived online. The phone recordings are backed up and time-stamped. Philippa can confirm the legal documentation. Everything in that envelope is verifiable truth." He looked back at Brielle. "Richard Pemberton, who is he?" Brielle went very still. "How did you..." "It says here you married him 6 years ago, that he accused you of marrying him for his money after his wife died, that you got $60,000 in the divorce settlement. Is that true?" "It was different then." Brielle's voice had gone quiet now, the shrieking replaced by something almost defeated. "He was awful. He lied about me. I was young and stupid, and he took advantage, and when I left, he tried to destroy my reputation. But that has nothing to do with us. What we have is real, Sebastian. You know it's real. Do I?" His voice cracked. "Because looking at this, it seems like everything about our relationship was calculated. You showed up 6 months after my dad died. You made me feel understood when I was at my lowest. You pushed for marriage before I even processed my grief. And now you're talking about putting my mother in a nursing home and getting power of attorney, and I didn't even know about any of it. Because you would have said no." The words burst out of her before she could stop them. "You would have let her manipulate you into protecting her instead of thinking about us, about our future, about what we deserve after everything." She stopped, realizing too late that she'd revealed too much. "What we deserve," Sebastian repeated. "You mean what you deserve. My mother's money. That's not what I meant. Get out." His voice was cold now, colder than I'd ever heard it. "Get out of this house. Get out of my life. We're done." Brielle's eyes went wide. "You don't mean that. Baby, please. I know this looks bad, but we can work through this. We're married. You can't just throw away our marriage over some papers your mother planted." "She didn't plant them. You found them yourself because you were snooping through her things. Just like you always do. Just like the investigator documented you doing." He looked at her like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. "How could I have been so blind?" "Because you wanted to believe someone loved you," I said softly. There's no shame in that, Sebastian. Brielle turned on me then. All pretense of charm vanished. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll take everything. I'll drag you both through the courts. I'll tell everyone what a manipulative, controlling bitch you are. I'll destroy you both. No. Philippa's voice cut through the room like a blade. You won't. Because if you try, I'll make sure every detail of this investigation becomes public record. Your pattern of targeting widowed men and vulnerable heirs, your credit card fraud, your threats, every text message, every email, every recorded phone call. I'll bury you so deep in legal fees and public humiliation that you'll be lucky to get a job serving coffee at Starbucks. The silence that followed was absolute. Brielle looked between the three of us. Sebastian's cold fury, Philippa's legal certainty, and my calm, patient face, and finally understood that she'd lost completely. I want her out of my apartment by tonight, Sebastian said to me, not to Brielle, like she'd already ceased to exist. Can Philippa handle the divorce? Already have the papers drafted, Philippa said. We'll offer $5,000 and a non-disclosure agreement. She can take it, or we can go to court with all of this evidence. Her choice. Brielle made one last attempt. Sebastian, please. I know I made mistakes, but… Mistakes? He laughed, bitter and broken. You married me as a business transaction. You isolated me from my mother. You planned to have her declared incompetent so you could steal her money. Those aren't mistakes, Brielle. That's who you are. She grabbed her purse, papers still scattered around her feet like evidence of a crime scene, walked to the door, then turned back one last time. You'll regret this, both of you. When you're old and alone and Sebastian realizes his mother's money isn't worth the years you stole from him. Get out, I said quietly. And if you contact my son again, if you post anything about him online, if you violate the non-disclosure agreement Philippa's going to send you, I will make it my personal mission to ensure everyone you ever meet knows exactly what kind of person you are. She left. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. We heard her car screech out of the driveway. And then it was just the three of us in the wreckage of what Brielle had tried to build and what we'd successfully torn down. Sebastian didn't move for a long time. He just stood there in the guest room doorway, staring at the scattered papers like they were evidence of his own stupidity. His hands were shaking. I wanted to reach for him, to comfort him the way I should have done 1,000 times when he was growing up. But I didn't know if he'd accept it. Didn't know if I'd earned that right yet. How long have you known? He asked finally. His voice was hollow. 6 weeks, I said. Philippa hired an investigator after Brielle made some comments that concerned her. The full report came back 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You knew for 3 weeks, and you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me if I had? I asked gently. Or would Brielle have convinced you I was lying, that I'd fabricated everything, because I was a jealous mother who couldn't accept that my son had moved on? He closed his eyes. She would have. God help me. She would have convinced me you were lying, and I would have believed her. He opened his eyes and looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw tears threatening. What does that say about me, Mom? That I would have chosen to believe her over you? It says you're human, Philippa interjected softly. Sebastian, your wife spent 8 months systematically manipulating you. She identified your vulnerabilities, your grief over your father, your complicated feelings about your mother, and she exploited them expertly. This isn't your fault, isn't it? His voice cracked. I married her. I let her isolate me from you. I listened when she said you were toxic, controlling, narcissistic. I believed every word because it fit the narrative I'd already built in my head about you. The absent mother who cared more about her career than her son. The words hung in the air between us, truth, naked and painful. You weren't wrong about that, I said quietly. I was absent, Sebastian. I did prioritize my career over being present for you. I missed plays and games and parent-teacher conferences. I let your father do all the emotional heavy lifting while I built my empire. And by the time I realized what I'd sacrificed, you were already grown and we were strangers. He turned to face me fully. Then why didn't you just tell me that? Why didn't you ever just say, I'm sorry, I fucked up, I chose wrong? Instead of trying to throw money at the problem or acting like we could just start over after Dad died. Because I didn't know how, I said, and my voice broke on the admission. I didn't know the language of apology. I knew negotiations and deals and strategies, but I didn't know how to tell my own son that I'd failed him in the ways that mattered most. So I tried to show you through actions, updating my will, trying to spend time with you, being available. But I never said the actual words you needed to hear. Tears were running down his face now. I needed to hear them, Mom. I needed you to acknowledge that you hurt me, that your choices had consequences, that I mattered enough for you to feel guilty about. You did matter, I whispered. You always mattered. I was just too proud and too afraid to admit that I'd destroyed our relationship through my own selfishness. And then your father died, and I thought maybe we could rebuild something. But I still didn't know how to bridge that gap. So when Brielle came along and made you feel seen, feel heard, feel valued in all the ways I never did, of course you chose her. Why wouldn't you? Sebastian wiped his eyes roughly. She wasn't real. Everything I thought she was, everything I felt when I was with her, it was all calculated, manufactured. She studied me like I was a mark, and I fell for it because I was so desperate to feel like someone actually gave a shit about my feelings that I didn't question whether those feelings were genuine. That's what predators do, Philippa said. They find wounded people and offer exactly what they need. Brielle is very good at what she does. She's had practice. Richard Pemberton, Sebastian said bitterly. I'm not even the first. I'm just the latest idiot to fall for her routine. He looked at me again. Did you know about him before the wedding? Did you know she'd done this before? No, I said honestly. I didn't know until Philippa's investigator found the records 3 weeks ago. If I'd known before the wedding, I would have told you. Even if you hated me for it, I would have told you. Would I have listened? He slumped against the doorframe. That's the real question, isn't it? If you'd come to me 8 months ago with concerns about Brielle, would I have listened? Or would I have told you to stay out of my life and accused you of trying to sabotage my happiness? I didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. He would have chosen Brielle, would have cut me out of his life completely to protect the woman who made him feel valued in ways I never had. I suggested a prenup, I said. Do you remember? At the wedding reception. And you exploded at me, because Brielle told me prenups meant you didn't trust your partner, that they were insulting, that suggesting one meant you were already planning for the marriage to fail. He laughed bitterly. She had an answer for everything. Every concern, every red flag, every moment of doubt. She had a perfectly reasonable explanation that made me feel stupid for questioning her. That's gaslighting, Philippa said. Classic manipulation technique. Make the victim doubt their own perception of reality. Sebastian pushed away from the doorframe and started pacing. The worst part is, I had doubts, so many doubts. The way she talked about your money, about the house, about your health, the way she monitored my phone calls with you, the way she always wanted to know about your investments, your assets, your estate planning. I noticed all of it. But every time I questioned her, she'd cry and say I didn't trust her, that I was projecting my issues with you onto her, that I was sabotaging our marriage because I was afraid of intimacy. She's a professional, I said. She's been doing this successfully for years. You're not stupid for falling for it, Sebastian. You were vulnerable and grieving, and she exploited that. This is on her, not you. But I let her, he said, and his voice was anguished now. I let her talk about putting you in a nursing home. I let her schedule visits to Silver Oaks. I listened to her plans about power of attorney and competency evaluations, and I told myself it was concern, not cruelty. What kind of son does that make me? The kind who was being systematically manipulated by someone very skilled at manipulation, Philippa said firmly. Sebastian, I've been practicing family law for 30 years. I've seen this pattern dozens of times. The victim always blames themselves, but you need to understand, Brielle chose you specifically because you were vulnerable. She researched your family, identified your weaknesses, and designed her entire approach around exploiting them. You never had a fair chance. He stopped pacing and looked at the papers still scattered on the floor. She was on forums asking how to get inheritance early from difficult in-laws. While we were on our honeymoon, while I was telling her I loved her and planning our future, she was plotting how to steal my mother's money. Yes, I said simply. There was no point in softening it. And the phone call last night. She actually said those things to you, about the cheap coffin. Yes, play it, he said suddenly. I need to hear it. I need to hear what she really sounds like when she thinks no one's listening. I hesitated. Sebastian, I don't think... Please, Mom. I need to hear it. So I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Brielle's voice filled the guest room, dripping with contempt and cruelty. Listen here, you old hag. Your son is mine now. Tomorrow you're going to that filthy nursing home to rot in a cheap coffin. Sebastian flinched with every word. When it was over, he was crying again, but silently this time. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and broken. I'm so sorry, he whispered. Mom, I'm so sorry. For believing her. For choosing her over you. For letting it get this far. And then he did something he hadn't done since he was a small child. He walked over to me and put his arms around me and buried his face in my shoulder and sobbed. Just completely broke down in a way I don't think he'd let himself do since Caspian died. Maybe not even then. I held him, stroked his hair like I used to when he was little and had nightmares. Let him cry out all the grief and betrayal and humiliation and rage. And I cried too, for the years we'd lost, for the relationship we'd never had, for the son I'd failed and the mother I'd never been. We're going to fix this, I said into his hair. Not our past. We can't change that. But we're going to build something new, something real, starting right now. He pulled back, wiping his eyes. How? How do we even start? Therapy, I said. Real therapy. Both of us, together and separately. We face what happened, all of it, not just Brielle, my absence, your resentment, the years of distance. We stop pretending we can just move forward without dealing with the past. And what about her? He asked. What about Brielle? Philippa stepped forward. I'll handle Brielle. She'll sign the divorce papers and the NDA. She'll take the $5,000 and disappear. And if she doesn't, I'll make her life legally miserable until she wishes she had. Sebastian nodded slowly. Then he looked around the guest room at the evidence of his wife's betrayal scattered across the floor like shrapnel. I need to go home, to San Francisco. I need to pack her things, change the locks, figure out how to untangle our lives. I'll come with you, I said. If you want. He met my eyes. Yeah, I want that. I don't want to do this alone. You're not alone, I said. Not anymore. Never again. And for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, I saw my son truly believe me. The flight to San Francisco was quiet. Sebastian sat by the window staring at the clouds, and I sat beside him reading through emails on my phone. We didn't talk much, but there was something different in the silence now. Not the strained, uncomfortable distance that had characterized our relationship for decades, but something calmer. Something that felt like we were finally on the same side. When we landed, Sebastian drove us to his apartment in Soma. It was a modern building, all glass and steel, the kind of place that screamed tech money and minimalist aesthetics. As we rode the elevator to the 14th floor, I watched my son's jaw tighten. He was preparing himself for what came next. She might be here, he said as we approached his door. She has keys. She might have come back. Are you ready for that? I asked. No, he said honestly. But let's do it anyway. He unlocked the door, and we stepped into chaos. Brielle had clearly been back. The living room looked like a hurricane had torn through it. Cushions thrown off the couch. Picture frames smashed on the floor. His laptop, his work laptop, had been hurled against the wall and lay in pieces. Books swept off shelves. The TV screen was shattered, a spider web of cracks radiating from an impact point. Jesus Christ, Sebastian breathed. She destroyed everything. I walked carefully through the wreckage. In the kitchen, every dish had been pulled from the cabinets and smashed. Glass and ceramic covered the floor like dangerous snow. The refrigerator door hung open, and someone, Brielle, obviously, had dumped milk, eggs, condiments, everything across the counters and floor. The smell was already turning sour. This is a crime scene, I said quietly. Sebastian, we need to document this. Take photos, call the police. This is destruction of property. But he was already moving toward the bedroom, and I heard him make a sound. Half gasp, half sob. I followed quickly and found him standing in the doorway, staring. His clothes had been shredded. Every suit, every shirt, every pair of pants, cut to ribbons with scissors or a knife and scattered across the floor. His shoes had been spray-painted with obscenities. His dresser drawers were pulled out and emptied. And on the wall above the bed, written in what I desperately hoped was lipstick but feared might be something worse, were the words, "You'll regret this, you fucking coward." "My dad's watch," Sebastian said suddenly, his voice panicked. He rushed to the nightstand, pulled open the drawer. Empty. She took my dad's watch, the one he wore every day, the one I inherited. That fucking bitch took my father's watch. "What else is missing?" I asked, trying to keep him focused, keep him from spiraling into rage that wouldn't help anything right now. He started checking. His iPad, gone. His backup laptop, gone. His passport, birth certificate, social security card, all gone. She'd taken everything that mattered, everything with value, either monetary or sentimental, and destroyed everything else. "I'm calling the police," I said firmly. Sebastian just nodded, looking shell-shocked. The officers arrived 30 minutes later, 2 of them, both looking exhausted and underpaid. They took statements, photographed the damage, wrote up a report, asked the standard questions. Had there been previous incidents of domestic violence? Had she threatened him? Did he feel safe? "I want a restraining order," Sebastian said. "Can I get a restraining order?" "You can file for one," the older officer said. "Given this level of destruction and the threats on the wall, a judge will likely grant it. But understand, a piece of paper doesn't physically stop someone from approaching you. It just gives us cause to arrest them if they violate it." After the police left, we stood in the wreckage of Sebastian's apartment and faced the reality of what came next. "I need to call my building manager," he said. "Get the locks changed. File an insurance claim. Contact my credit card companies in case she tries to use my information. Call my bank. Contact work about my laptop." He was ticking items off on his fingers, trying to create order from chaos. "I'll help," I said. "Whatever you need." We spent the next 3 hours on the phone. Building management came and changed the locks. A cleaning service arrived to deal with the destruction. I'd called them while Sebastian was talking to his insurance company, used my credit card without asking because I knew he'd argue about it. They took photos for their records, then began carefully sweeping up glass and ceramic, bagging the shredded clothes, documenting everything for the insurance claim. It was nearly 7 in the evening when Sebastian's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face went pale. "It's her. It's Brielle." "Don't answer," I started to say, but he was already accepting the call. "What do you want?" His voice was cold. I could hear her even though he didn't put it on speaker. She was crying, hysterical. "Sebastian, baby, I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I was just so angry and hurt, and I didn't know what I was doing. Please, can we talk? Can I come over? I need to explain." "You destroyed my apartment, Brielle. You stole my father's watch. You trashed my work laptop. The police have been here. There's a report filed. You're looking at criminal charges for destruction of property. I'll give it all back." Her voice was desperate now. "I was just upset. I wasn't thinking clearly. But I never stopped loving you, Sebastian. We can work through this. Your mother poisoned you against me. But if we just talk, if you just listen to my side—" "Your side." Sebastian's voice was shaking with controlled fury. "Your side is that you married me to steal my mother's money, that you researched my family before we even met, that you manipulated me, isolated me, and planned to have my mother declared incompetent so you could rob her. That's your side, Brielle. And there's nothing you can say that changes those facts. Those documents were fake. Your mother fabricated them. Richard Pemberton." Sebastian's voice was flat. "Was he fake too? Was your first marriage to a wealthy widower fake? Were those court records fake?" Silence on the other end. "Then, that was different. He lied about me. He tried to destroy my reputation when I left him. Or maybe you showed him exactly who you are, just like you showed me. Maybe he's the one who dodged a bullet by getting away from you with only $60,000 lost. Don't you dare compare us. What we had was real, Sebastian. I know I made mistakes, but I loved you. I still love you." "No," Sebastian said, and there was something final in his voice, something that sounded like a door closing forever. "You loved what I represented. You loved my mother's money and the lifestyle you thought you could have. But you never loved me. Because if you had, you wouldn't have spent our entire marriage plotting how to steal from my family. That's not—" "It's over, Brielle. Philippa's sending you divorce papers. You sign them, you take the settlement we're offering, and you disappear from our lives. Or we go to court, make everything public, and you get nothing except a criminal record and a reputation that ensures you'll never successfully scam anyone again. Your choice. You can't do this to me. Her voice had gone shrill again. I gave up everything for you. I moved to San Francisco for you. I supported your career. I was the perfect wife. The perfect wife doesn't threaten to put her husband's mother in a nursing home. The perfect wife doesn't accumulate $47,000 in secret credit card debt. The perfect wife doesn't destroy an apartment in a rage when she doesn't get her way. Sebastian's voice was deadly calm now. You're not the victim here, Brielle. You're the predator. And I'm not prey anymore. Sebastian, please. Return my father's watch. Return my passport and documents. Return everything you took. Bring them to my building's front desk within 24 hours. If you don't, I'm filing additional theft charges, and then sign the divorce papers and get out of my life. I won't. You can't make me. I have rights. I'm your wife. Not for long, he said, and hung up. His hands were shaking. He looked at me with eyes that were exhausted but clear. Did I do okay? You did perfectly, I said softly. I'm proud of you. His phone immediately started ringing again. Brielle. He declined the call. It rang again. Declined, again. Finally, he turned it off completely. She's not going to make this easy, I said. I know. He sank onto the one piece of furniture that had survived, a leather armchair that had been Caspian's, that Sebastian had taken after the funeral. I can't believe I married someone who would do this. Who would destroy my things, steal my dad's watch, trash my home like a spoiled child having a tantrum. She showed you exactly who she is when she thinks she's lost control, I said. This is what Brielle looks like when she doesn't get what she wants. Vindictive, destructive, dangerous. I need to stay somewhere else tonight, he said. I can't sleep here. Not with her messages on the wall, not with everything destroyed. I can't. Hotel, I said. We'll get a hotel. A nice one. Order room service. Figure out next steps. We ended up at the Ritz-Carlton. I booked a suite with 2 bedrooms, charged it to my card before Sebastian could protest. We ordered dinner. Neither of us had eaten since the plane, and sat in the living room area picking at salmon and pasta while CNN played mutely on the TV. How did you know? Sebastian asked suddenly. How did you know she'd fall apart like this? Because people like Brielle always do, I said. When their control is threatened, when their carefully constructed facade cracks, they don't have anything underneath. No genuine self, no real relationships, no authentic connections. Just rage and desperation and a fundamental belief that they're entitled to whatever they want. I fell in love with a mirage, he said quietly. You fell in love with what you needed at the time, I corrected. Someone who seemed to offer unconditional acceptance and emotional validation. That's not shameful, Sebastian. That's human. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I blamed you for so much, for not being there, for choosing your career over me, for being the opposite of the mother I needed. And all of that was true, but it also made me vulnerable to someone like Brielle, someone who could weaponize my resentment against you. I gave her plenty of ammunition, I said. I wasn't the mother you deserved. I can't change that, but I can be better now. If you'll let me. I want that, he said. But Mom, I need you to understand. It's going to take time. We can't just skip over 30 years of distance and resentment because we had one emotional breakthrough. We need to actually do the work. I know, I said. That's why I meant what I said about therapy. Real, sustained, uncomfortable therapy where we both have to face things we'd rather avoid. Yeah, he smiled slightly. Yeah, we definitely need that. His phone, he'd turned it back on to check messages from work, buzzed. A text from Philippa. Brielle's lawyer called. She's willing to negotiate, wants to meet tomorrow. Also, building security reports, she tried to enter Sebastian's building an hour ago. They denied her access per your instructions. She made a scene. Police were called, but she left before they arrived. Sebastian read it aloud, then looked at me. She's escalating. She's desperate, I said, which makes her dangerous. Sebastian, until this is resolved, you need to be careful. Don't go anywhere alone. Vary your routine. Be aware of your surroundings. You think she'd actually hurt me? I think she's already shown she's willing to destroy your property and steal your belongings. I don't know what else she's capable of, and I don't want to find out. I took his hand. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't underestimate her just because you used to be married to her. I promise, he said. And Mom, thank you for not giving up on me, for protecting me even when I didn't want to be protected, for being here now. I'm your mother, I said simply. That's what mothers do, or what they should do, what I should have done all along. We sat there in that hotel room, the ruins of Sebastian's apartment behind us, and an uncertain future ahead, but together for the first time in longer than either of us could remember. Not fixed, not healed, but finally on the same side of the battle. The next morning, we met with Philippa and Brielle's attorney, a nervous-looking man who clearly knew his client was indefensible. The negotiation was brief. Brielle wanted $20,000. Philippa countered with $5,000 and a promise not to press criminal charges if she returned all stolen items within 24 hours and never contacted Sebastian again. My client feels she's entitled to more, given the length of the marriage and her contributions, the lawyer said weakly. Your client was married for 8 months and spent most of that time planning how to rob her husband's mother, Philippa said coldly. She's lucky we're offering anything at all. $5,000, return of stolen property, signed NDA and permanent no contact. Take it, or we file criminal charges, pursue theft prosecution, and make every detail of her pattern public record. Choose. They took it. 2 days later, Sebastian's passport, documents, and, most importantly, Caspian's watch were delivered to the building's front desk. The watch had a scratch on the crystal face that made Sebastian flinch when he saw it, but it was back. That was what mattered. The divorce papers were signed, the NDA was executed, and Brielle Cortez disappeared from our lives as suddenly as she'd entered them. $5,000 richer and legally forbidden from ever contacting my son again. It was over. But in a real way, it was just beginning. 3 months after Brielle signed the divorce papers, Sebastian and I sat in a therapist's office in Greenwich. Dr. Elena Martinez was in her 60s, with kind eyes and an impressive CV that included specialization in family trauma and parent-child reconciliation. This was our 8th session together, and the first one where neither of us had cried. I want to talk about forgiveness today, Dr. Martinez said. Not the performative kind, not the let's pretend everything is fine kind, but real forgiveness. What does that look like for both of you? Sebastian was quiet for a moment. He'd moved back to Greenwich temporarily, staying in the guest room, the same room where Brielle had discovered the envelope that destroyed her carefully constructed lies. We'd repainted it together, replaced the furniture, turned it into something new. Symbolic, maybe, but it felt important. I don't know if I can forgive completely, he said finally. Not yet. Mom missed too much, and I spent too many years resenting her for it. But I'm learning to understand why she made the choices she did. And I'm learning that understanding doesn't require approval, just acceptance of reality. That's honest, Dr. Martinez said, then turned to me. Ophelia? I need to forgive myself, I said. That's harder than seeking forgiveness from Sebastian, because I can see so clearly now all the moments I missed, all the times I chose a client meeting over a school play, all the nights I stayed late at the office instead of coming home for dinner. I built an empire, but I lost my son in the process, and I don't know how to forgive myself for that. What if forgiveness isn't the goal? Dr. Martinez suggested. What if the goal is simply to accept that you both did the best you could with the tools and understanding you had at the time? Was it my best, though? I asked. Or was it just easier to work than to deal with the messy, emotional work of parenting? Maybe both, Sebastian said quietly. Maybe you loved your work more than you loved being a mom. Maybe that's just true, and we have to live with that truth. It hurt to hear, but it was also a relief, because it was honest in a way we'd never been before. And maybe, I said carefully, I can't change what kind of mother I was, but I can change what kind of mother I am now, if you're willing to let me. I am, Sebastian said. That's why I'm here. That's why I keep showing up even when these sessions are hard and uncomfortable and make me want to run away, because I want something different than what we had. I want a real relationship with you, not just the performance of one. We left that session and drove to the cafe we'd started frequenting together. A small place near the water where they made excellent coffee and the pastries were always fresh. It had become our Thursday ritual: therapy, then coffee, then whatever came next. I got a job offer, Sebastian said as we settled into our usual corner table. Tech company in Boston. Similar role to what I had in San Francisco, but better pay, better benefits. And it would put me 2 hours from Greenwich instead of 3,000 miles. My heart jumped, but I kept my face neutral. Is that what you want? Or are you doing it because you think I need you nearby? Both, maybe? He smiled slightly. I like being closer. I like having coffee with you on Thursdays. I like that when I have a bad day, I can drive down here instead of sitting alone in my apartment wondering why I feel like shit. But I also like the job. It's a good opportunity, so I think I'm going to take it. I'm glad, I said simply. Because I was. Not just for the proximity, but because he was making the choice himself. Not being manipulated into it. Not being guilted into it. Just choosing it because he wanted to. I've been thinking about Dad a lot, he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. About what he'd think of all this, the Brielle situation, us trying to fix things. What do you think he'd say? I think he'd be relieved, Sebastian said. He always wanted us to be closer. He tried to bridge the gap, but I think he knew he couldn't do it alone, that we had to do the work ourselves. He looked up at me. He loved you, you know. Even when you drove him crazy with your work schedule and your inability to just sit still and be present. He really loved you. I know, I said, and my voice cracked. I loved him too, so much, and I regret every moment I didn't show him that clearly enough. I think he knew, Sebastian said. The way I always knew you loved me, even when you weren't there. I needed more than knowing. I needed feeling it. I'm trying to do better with that, I said. The showing up, the being present, not just financially, but emotionally. I know you are, he said, and it matters. It really matters. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the water through the cafe windows. It was late March now, almost exactly 3 years since Caspian died. Almost exactly 1 year since Sebastian married Brielle. The symmetry wasn't lost on either of us. Have you heard anything from her? I asked. I tried not to bring up Brielle often, but sometimes I needed to know. No, the restraining order expires in another 9 months, but her lawyer assured Philippa she's moved to Miami. New target, probably. Some other vulnerable man she can manipulate into marriage. He said it matter-of-factly, but I could hear the bitterness underneath. That's not your responsibility, I reminded him gently. You can't save people from Brielle. You can only protect yourself. I know. Doesn't mean I don't think about warning whoever she's with now. The NDA prevents that. I know that too. He sighed. Doesn't make it easier. Philippa joined us 15 minutes later, another Thursday ritual. She ordered her usual Earl Grey and settled in with her tablet, reviewing some case or another. The three of us had become an unlikely unit over these past months. Not a traditional family, but something that functioned like one. The trust modification went through, Philippa said without preamble. Sebastian is now listed as primary beneficiary, but with provisions that protect against any future complications. That was our code for gold-digging spouses. The new trust structure meant that even if Sebastian remarried, his inheritance was protected in ways that would prevent another Brielle situation. Thank you, Sebastian said, though I'm not planning on getting married again anytime soon. Or ever. I'm seriously considering becoming a monk. Give it time, Philippa said dryly. Not everyone is Brielle, though I do recommend better vetting next time. Next time, I'm bringing them to meet you within the first month, Sebastian said. If they pass the Philippa test, maybe they're worth pursuing. Smart man, I said, and we all laughed. It felt good to laugh. To sit in this cafe with my son and my best friend and feel like we were building something real. Not perfect, not without complications or old wounds that still ached sometimes, but real in a way that my life hadn't been for a very long time. That evening, back at the house, Sebastian helped me prepare dinner. We were cooking together more now. His idea, after Dr. Martinez suggested we needed to build new positive memories to counterbalance all the negative ones. He was teaching me recipes Caspian used to make, dishes I'd eaten 100 times without ever learning how to create them myself. Dad would put rosemary in at this stage, Sebastian said, showing me the timing. He said it made all the difference between good chicken and great chicken. Your father was a better cook than I ever gave him credit for, I admitted. Another thing I didn't appreciate properly until it was too late. He knew you appreciated it, Sebastian said. Even if you didn't say it out loud, he knew. We ate dinner at the table Caspian had chosen, using the dishes we'd collected together over 34 years of marriage. And for the first time since his death, the house didn't feel empty. It felt like maybe, possibly, it was becoming a home again. After dinner, Sebastian pulled out a photo album I hadn't seen in years. I found this in Dad's study, pictures from when I was a kid. We went through it together. There were photos of all of us, Caspian and Sebastian at baseball games, me in the background of some shots, dressed for work or distracted by my phone. But there were other photos too. Me reading to Sebastian when he was 4, both of us engrossed in the story. Me at his 5th grade science fair, looking genuinely proud. Me hugging him at his high school graduation, tears in my eyes. I forgot about these, Sebastian said quietly. I spent so many years remembering only the times you weren't there that I forgot the times you were. I wasn't there enough, I said. That's still true. No, he agreed. But you were there sometimes, and that matters too. We reached the end of the album. The last photo was from Caspian's birthday, 2 months before he died. The 3 of us together, Caspian's arms around both of us, all of us smiling. We looked happy. We looked like a family. We can't go back, I said. We can't redo the past or fix what was broken. But maybe we can build something new. Yeah, Sebastian said, closing the album carefully. Maybe we can. 6 months after Brielle signed the divorce papers, Sebastian moved into his new apartment in Boston. I helped him unpack, hung pictures on his walls, stocked his refrigerator. When I left that evening, he hugged me goodbye. A real hug, not the stiff, obligatory kind we'd exchanged for years. Love you, Mom, he said. Love you too, I said. So much. And I meant it. And he knew I meant it. And that made all the difference. The story of Brielle Cortez was over. But the story of Ophelia and Sebastian Letmore was just beginning. It wasn't a perfect story. It wasn't even a fully healed story. But it was honest, and it was ours, and it was built on something stronger than manipulation, or obligation, or guilt. It was built on choice, on showing up, on doing the hard work of rebuilding what had been broken. And that finally was enough.